Okay, we're live.
Thank you. Good afternoon and welcome everyone, members of council and staff and folks at home via YouTube to this special meeting of Mahone Bay Town Council. We'll begin by acknowledging that we are gathered together today in Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral, present, and future territory of the Mi'kmaq people. Today, we gather with the intent followed by the living peace and friendship treaties with respect, cooperation, and coexistence. Council, we will call the meeting to order. We have just two items on the agenda today. The first one is to have a brief discussion and hopefully get some direction on the non-resident tax issue, which is causing quite a bit of discussion in our community and communities throughout Nova Scotia. And then we'll have a closed session on a personnel issue. So with that, we'll ask for a motion to approve the agenda as presented. Councillor Feeney moves, Councillor Now seconds, all in favor. Motion is carried. Councillor Carver is with us. Did you have a question, Councillor Carver?
A question on the agenda. I just wasn't clear on why the non-residence tax item was on this particular meeting agenda as opposed to a regular meeting agenda.
I think you'll see as this unfolds what the intent was with putting it on the agenda.
Well, thank you.
Okay. Yes, the non-resident tax agenda. Those of you that may have occasion to meet people in town and chat with them or who follow social media will realize that is a topic of much discussion. We've had emails from citizens, even had a lengthy email from Councillor Feeney, who is the chair of the PVSC, to discuss their position. And the suggestion is whether or not council should be offering council's position on the new legislation. The NSFM is having a meeting a week from Wednesday, a week from tomorrow. It's on their agenda. That is the point of the meeting, is to discuss it. Our next council meeting is a week from Thursday. It would almost be a moot point then for Mahone Bay's town council to come out and say, either we support it or we don't support it. So the suggestion is that if Mahone Bay Town Council is in agreement and wishes to make a motion one way or the other, the motion would be either to direct staff to prepare a letter to go to the Premier, the MLA, NSFM, the other mayors in Lunenburg County, defining our position and our opposition, if that's appropriate, or to accept it as presented. So that's why that item is on the agenda, just because of timeliness, right? Because our first formal opportunity would be a week from Thursday to meet as in regular council. And if we were to direct staff in, you're talking probably May the 5th, May the 6th before such a letter would be underway. Deputy Mayor?
So it was Easter weekend. I haven't had a chance to look at all the emails that have come in since Thursday, probably.
Mm-hmm.
It would be very helpful for me to just hear the thoughts that have been shared by email, because I haven't had a chance to look at that around the opposition towards the tax.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Wilson, I know that you've been following the email traffic and you submitted a couple to council for inclusion in the package for a week from Thursday's meeting. Would you like to offer a comment to the Deputy Mayor?
Happy to, and I just sent an email, which is the same letter that George Anderson sent me last week. to all of council, so it should be in front of you now. To the deputy mayor's point, I mean, it's obviously a complicated issue, but at the very top of the list of reasons why I would be opposed to the provincial legislation is because they're playing in our sandbox. This is municipal taxes are our only real source of revenue, and having the province jump in there and take a huge chunk of that off the top, albeit for a small group of people, is problematic in and of itself. I guess putting that aside, this is another one of those solutions that someone has dreamt up that doesn't solve the problem. As George Anderson points out, that a punitive tax on people who own a home in Nova Scotia but don't reside here on a permanent basis is not going to do anything to solve the affordable housing issue. And he elucidates a number of things that are contributing, not least Airbnbs, the fact that there are all kinds of issues with inflation and so on and so forth, and affordability is in part being caused by the huge increase in house prices in Nova Scotia in the last 18 months, 2 years, which have far exceeded inflation, and on and on and on. And then he goes on to detail a couple of things that actually would help. That part of it is a kind of a complex argument. I understand that, but it seems to me fairly straightforward that there are two fundamental arguments. One is that keep your hands off our tax base, and the other is do something about the affordable housing problem that's real, not cosmetic. This is basically just a tax grab by the province. The money's going to go into the general coffers and it'll never be seen again. So, just a black hole. So those are sort of off the top of my head some of the reasons that have been expounded by a couple of people that have written to me, and I'm sure lots of you have gotten other feedback from other people. So I will now shut up.
Mr. Anderson, I would note, who was the former chair of CMHC federally, has written a formal letter from that perspective in his former capacity to the provincial government to extol his concerns as well, apart from what he is sending to council. Councillor Feeney.
Thank you, Mayor. So I guess I'd like to make a couple points. It's been my observation that most informed opinion is lining up in opposition to this legislation, both on its substance and on its implementation and the drafting of the legislation, which has led some well-informed organizations to have some concerns that will be shared with the province, I'm sure, in due course. Fundamentally, the property tax payers require advocacy. And if not from the town councils that represent the taxpayers, where else would they get that advocacy? And in my opinion, personally, I think there's little evidence that there's any benefit to town councils around the province and municipal governments as a whole to support the legislation. And I do believe that really the homeowners deserve to have some representation at the table as these discussions are unfolding. And I think that their representatives are the people that are at this meeting and our colleagues around the province. So I'm unaware of any municipal government that is in support of the legislation, although maybe there are one or two. I think that the downsides and the unintended consequences that are deriving from the legislation are really asymmetrical. There is a dramatic impact on municipal units on the South Shore. And I think the CAO mentioned some of the statistics last week about the impact and the volume of impact in Mahone Bay as a case study. But certainly some of the most significant negative impacts are seen by our neighbors to the north and to the south of us, in Chester, in Lunenburg, and all along the South Shore. Personally, I think that the policy hasn't been well thought out, but I think fundamentally we should support the overall momentum behind expressing concern, knowing that our opportunity to really influence the legislation is, not strong. But I do think that we should take up the policy. I think that we should join our colleagues in the other municipalities, similar to the information that was presented in the Chester municipality of Chester's note that council had access to last week.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you, Councillor Feeney. Councillor Carver.
Yes, I agree with everything that's been said so far. I feel that this legislation is misbegotten. It allegedly is to improve the affordable housing situation, and there's absolutely no evidence to show that there's any connection between this proposed new tax and the amelioration of the affordable housing situation in the province. In fact, the finance minister did state publicly that the $81 million that is expected to be collected from this tax will offset the $81 million that they've already planned to spend. And there's again, I repeat, there's absolutely no evidence that this is going to help offset the affordable housing situation. What I am concerned about is the process of our council in bringing this today, and I would be concerned about making a decision on this today, given that there has been no public notice, as we usually expect that agendas be published with background material for the public to have an opportunity to examine prior to council making a decision. So I'm going to make a suggestion because the sense seems to be that people are supporting the idea of making a public statement, that a letter be drafted between now and our next council meeting, and that at our next council meeting on April 28th, the draft letter be presented to council, and the public will have had a chance to see the draft letter and also any background documentation we would care to include with that agenda. And if council supports that draft letter, it could go out right away. NSFM has said they, as of last week, at a public NSFM meeting, said that they were not prepared to make a stand at that point because in their view, there were municipalities who were not in agreement with opposing the bill. But they did encourage all the municipalities to write letters everywhere that they could possibly think of, including NSFM, to let them know what their positions were. So that's my suggestion, that we prepare a draft letter based on points that we're making today, and possibly might be submitted between now and our next meeting on April 28th. But I'm given the short notice for everybody on this topic for this meeting, I'm not prepared to vote on it today.
Okay, if you choose not to vote, Councillor Carver, if it comes to a vote and you choose not to vote, that's your choice.
Yes, I understand that, but I think we're breaking our own rules by bringing it to a vote today. I don't think that the timeliness is an issue because it's going to be legislation whether or not we write a letter today or on April 28th. Okay. I don't believe it'll make a difference.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Wilson and then Deputy Mayor Kangata.
I'd like to actually make a motion similar to what Councillor Carver was saying. I'd like to move that council direct staff to prepare a letter addressed to the Premier with copies to the Minister of Housing, the Minister of Municipal Affairs, and the Minister of Finance, and our MLA, as well as the mayors and wardens in Lunenburg County, to the chair of NSFM, expressing our opposition to the proposed provincial tax on new non-resident homeowners, and outlining the reasons for our opposition with a view to getting council's approval for that letter at our next council meeting.
Okay. Councillor Carver seconds that motion. Clerk, you had a question? And I'm going to go to the deputy mayor, but I assume this is a question on the motion.
It is, please. Councillor Wilson, could you please repeat that motion? I got most of it, but it started to lose me by the end there. Thank you.
I'm not sure that's even possible, but I'll give it a try. Move the council direct staff to prepare a letter addressed to the Premier with copies to the Minister of Housing, the Minister of Municipal Affairs, the Minister of Finance, and our MLA, as well as the mayors and wardens in Lunenburg County and the chair of the Nova Scotia municipality, expressing our opposition to the proposed provincial tax on non-resident homeowners and outlining the reasons for our opposition. I can send you that in an email if you want.
Clerk?
Nope. Thank you. I have the text, and I'd just like to raise my hand for next in line to speak. Thank you.
Okay, deputy mayor, and then we'll go back to the clerk.
Yeah, thank you for the perspective and just bringing me up to speed. So when in thinking about this, as folks have said, it's a complicated issue to think through. I guess an opening statement I would want to make is, so we have a crisis around affordable housing in Nova Scotia. We have to admit that. For me, it's challenging when we are in an economy in a country where people have 3-4 homes, and there are other people who are homeless, and we've done nothing about it. So when I think about this tax, something is being done, whether it's right or wrong, something is being done to try and address that. And so I find it very challenging to just oppose that just because the government is doing something that we don't like. Now, that said, I'm very wary of the fact, like we all say, like it's been said, that the provincial government is encroaching on what is, I would say, municipal sandbox, has been mentioned. I think we should raise that issue and mention that if there's anything that's coming out of it should be municipal funds to go and address affordable housing issues within the municipalities. It should not be going to the government coffers. There should be further investment into addressing affordable housing. I think that's something we should be mentioning rather than just opposing. There's no evidence to show that this as a measure necessarily fixes affordable housing, but there is evidence to show that it might impact the sale and acquisition of housing to ensure that at least vacant homes that stay only around and are only lived in for a few months of the year is addressed. And I think it's been mentioned at council a few times in the past, whereby at least one council member has been concerned about one house that has been virtually empty for quite a long time. And so something needs to be done about that. It's for me, it's unconscionable that we can have empty homes where people are living out in the streets or people don't have a home. That needs to be addressed. And so I feel very, there's a challenge for me sort of telling the provincial government, don't do anything when they've shown, well, this is the card we want to play. It might not be the card that we think should be played, but at least they're moving towards addressing that much more than any other government has done. And so with the opposition, if it's an opposition letter, the only issue that I think I have enough evidence now to sort of say, well, we should be in opposition of that is the provincial government taxing folks and then taking that money to their general coffers and using it for something else. That money should be going back to the same communities and be tied to addressing affordable housing, if that's the notion of this taxation. Rather than be in opposition for the sake of opposition because folks are doing that, I would want us to think about what exactly do do we stand to lose and gain by opposing rather than just opposing because everybody is? I know, yes, everybody is opposing in certain cases, but is that necessarily the right direction? I don't believe it is. So I would not be voting for the blanket opposition.
All right, thank you. Clerk, and then Councillor Carver.
Thank you, Your Worship. From a staff perspective, I'd like it to be very clear, and maybe the CAO is more confident with what the list is. But the motion references outlining our reasons for opposing the tax. That I think is something that should come from council. What specifically are the reasons rather than staff filling in the gaps?
Agreed. Councillor Carver.
Well, yes, that was the point I wanted to make too, that there's absolutely no reason why this letter should be oppositional, solely oppositional in nature. It could have suggestions for other ways of other approaches as well. So that was a little bit what was behind my thinking in saying ideas could be submitted in advance and then a draft letter prepared and a decision made at the next council meeting, April 28th.
Okay, Councillor Feeney.
I do think this timeline will work for the meeting of the 28th, noting that the agenda will be set several days before that, I believe. And it's my sense of things that there'll be a number of position papers that will come out from organizations that will have informed opinions and subject matter experts. And that I'm sure our inbox will be filling up with correspondence from various organizations, as well as the Federation should have some policy positions staked out. So I do think council will have an opportunity to contemplate the rationale for support or not, or lack thereof, and that will help kind of form the document. And so I do think this is a collaborative effect. I think we should collaborate on crafting the notes if that's council's will, versus leaving this entirely in the staff's hands, capable hands. But I think in this situation, I think we all should lend a hand.
Okay. Councillor Now.
Yeah, I'm certainly in favor of writing the letter to the province as our opposition to the tax. What I would like to see in there is something saying that, we wouldn't be as opposed if we were assured that money was being designated towards the affordable housing sector of it. We've got no guarantee, there's nothing to indicate that. So we have no idea where that money is actually going to end up. So I'd like to see something in there that actually gives us some credence to why the tax is being.
Okay, thank you. And I think if I could, Councillor, Now, at the same time, phrasing our note to the province with some caution that we don't inadvertently suggest that the housing become the responsibility or the purview of the municipality. Now, the housing issue is a provincial issue. They're already making it a municipal issue by going into the municipal tax coffer, skimming the money off the top. No guarantee that it's going to go to housing. But in the process, at some point in the future, it may be construed as the municipality embracing the responsibility for low-cost housing, which clearly is a provincial responsibility. Okay, we have a motion on the floor. A citizen who was watching our proceedings has asked me if, before council goes to vote on a motion, we could have the motion read again, so it is clear as to what the motion is that we are voting on. So clerk, I know that did you get something from Councillor Feeney that you can give us now?
I got from Councillor Wilson when he reread it again. There were just a
Or
couple of spots
Councillor
I wasn't.
Wilson?
And my only concern at this point is that the motion ends with outlining the town's reasons for opposing this. And based on right now, I'm assuming that council will then forward us their this motion as it is right now. Council will then forward us their reasons. But the motion as it stands right now, the council directs staff to prepare a letter addressed to the Premier with copies to the Minister of the Department of Municipal Affairs and Housing, the Minister of Finance, the MLA for Lunenburg, the mayors and wardens of Lunenburg County, and the chair of the Nova Scotia Federation of Municipalities, expressing the town of Mahone Bay's opposition to the proposed provincial tax for non-resident homeowners and outlining the town's reasons for opposing this.
Would it be fair to change the word opposition to the perspective of council or the opinion of council? Because as Councillor Carver suggested, it's not necessarily opposition per se.
Sorry, your suggestion is that it would say expressing the town of Mahone Bay's position on the proposed
Or
provincial tax?
defining the town of Mahone Bay's perspective on it. Councillor Carver, you had your hand up?
Yes, I was going to say substitute concerns. Perspectives would suit me, but it was Councillor Wilson who made the motion.
Councillor Wilson.
Yes, the problem with my motion, it was conceived in haste, of course, so that's one of the problems. But the real problem is that we're asking staff to outline our reasons for our opposition. And our reasons are probably as varied as the 7 of us sitting here. So that's a little bit of a daunting task, I realize. There are 2 ways of doing this, I think. One is to scrap the last part of that, and just stop the motion at non-resident homeowners without including the outlining the reasons for our opposition. So we'll just say we're opposed at this point. And between now and our next council meeting, should we so wish, we can put together a point form list of the reasons why, which I think will largely be a summary of the letter from Chester Municipality, the letter from George Anderson, the letter from Marcia Fields, and whatever else comes over the transom in the next few days.
Okay. Councillor Feeney?
No, I think that's a good edit, Mayor. I also think the nuance of it's not just it's property owners. It's like any property owner
Okay.
that
Yeah.
is
Should've said
not
that.
domiciled here versus just homeowners. So it's not,
Yeah.
it's just raw land, islands, across the board. Anybody who pays property tax.
And this motion that you're considering, council, is being made with the understanding that what this motion is going to result in is a letter being prepared. At the meeting on the 28th, whatever it is, of April, 27th, 28th of April, that is when council will make the decision to actually dispatch the letter.
Right.
Okay? Okay. Deputy Mayor, do you have a comment?
Yeah, so sorry to make this procedural, but as the motion stands, I can't support it. I can say I can support a letter that outlines our concerns. I can't support a letter that says oppose.
Okay.
So yeah, I think for me, there's a nuance there that I think is very, very important.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Carver.
Yes, I would rather have the motion not use the word oppose. I prefer the word perspective or concerns. Perspective is even more neutral, but then it does provide the opportunity for outlining concerns and possible other suggestions. So I would prefer the language not be quite so absolute.
Okay,
Your worship, if I may, my seconder is now complaining about the motion she seconded. So I'm not prepared to change it on this because of the very simple reason that this is a tax grab in an area of taxation where historically municipalities have held sway, and where really it's the only place where we can get money absent a provincial law change. And God knows our taxes are going up enough and too much already across the province. So it's to my mind, it's a non-negotiable issue. But I'm happy to remove this, include, to Councillor Feeney's point, non-resident property owners instead of homeowners, and remove the outlining the reasons for our opposition if my seconder agrees, and if she doesn't agree, then we'll just have to vote.
Councillor Carver, you agree?
No, I will support it. And just for the record, anybody can second a motion just to get an issue on the table for discussion. Doesn't mean you have to support the vote when it, or suppose
No, that's right.
when it comes to a vote. But I had another point there, which was that we should also be cognizant of the fact that there are members of our community who on social media have been commenting in favor of this new tax. So it's something we just should be aware of. And I'm happy to support the motion today, because I think that we will be able to collectively, collaboratively draft a good letter that represents different perspectives amongst us for consideration at the April 28th meeting. I have confidence that we can support staff in preparing that draft.
And hopefully the draft will be at a satisfactory point to be considered by council on the 28th, and that we not get into a wordsmithing exercise at the council meeting on the 28th. Anyway, there is a motion on the floor, clerk.
Thank you, Your Worship. So the mover has agreed to the substitution of non-resident property owners as opposed to homeowners. Is the seconder okay with that?
She is.
And then would it also be wise to add to be presented to council at the April 28th, 2022 regular council meeting? Just to be very clear for the minutes. Is that
Yes,
okay with the
please.
mover and seconder? Yeah, thank you.
Seconder's okay, all right. Okay, you've heard the motion a number of times. All in favor? And opposed? Deputy Mayor, you are voting, you're opposed? You're voting nay to the motion? If you don't vote, you're going to be counted as a nay.
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
I know that. Yeah.
Okay, motion is carried. Make sure that we all get our comments in writing into the clerk. To you, clerk, or to Ms. Redden? To you, okay. To assist in the preparation of that correspondence for the 28th of April. Okay, thank you, council. I now entertain a motion to go in camera. Moved by Councillor Wilson. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Feeney, all in favor? We are now in camera.